Hello, how are you, my dear?
It's so good to see you.
Great to see you.
You
Happy
know, I
day.
figured I figured we've got an interesting conversation because I know you just got back home.
Yes, I did.
Back home from home.
Back home from home. Yes, indeed. Yep,
Just
upstate New
home might be a
York.
loose term.
Well, the travel is always kind of that, like the movie with, what is it, planes, trains, and automobiles.
I
The
love
only
that
thing
movie.
I didn't ride a train. I rode a ferry. That was my instead of a train.
Well,
It
that's the
was
first time
great.
I've ridden a ferry was with you. I've
That's
never
right. Oh
done
my
that before.
gosh, I love it. That's right. I remember that. Yes, it
You
was a lot
know,
of fun.
we've spoken about this before, but we'll go into it, I guess. We'll hit the ground running.
Okay.
Your property where you just visited,
Hmm.
you grew up on, and see the episodes the first episode about kind of your where we introduced kind of how you were raised, but also the episode where we kind of interview how you were raised and about
Yes.
your book,
Yes.
essentially. But the land itself seems to have a very, very, well, we know for a fact it has a very strong relationship with Skinwalkers.
Absolutely. Very much so.
And we're going to go in, you're kind of sharing with me recently that the youngest in your bloodline,
Hmm.
sweet, sweet kiddo. But his dad was basically saying and produced pictures that there was a
Yes.
visitation, and
Yes.
you saw those pictures.
Yes, indeed. It was
What
it
did
was
they look like?
remarkable. Well, it was very, very it was extremely a shock. Let me put it that way. Very surprising because it's not very often then you can actually catch them on camera. And he was not even looking for them when he took the picture. He was taking a picture, of his youngest,
Mm,
and it was in the background in the tree line. And what was
mm.
so incredible about it was that the picture was quite clear, but he took subsequent pictures, right after, just to make sure it wasn't just something that kind of looked different, and it had gone. It was no longer revealing itself in the picture, but it was a very clear picture. There is a term, and there are many different types of kind of features for this. And yes, they're skinwalkers, but they also kind of mirror in some ways what you would see if you were looking at what they used to refer to as dog soldiers. There's a
What?
there's a term called dog soldiers, and if you Google search it, you'll get many different pictures if you look for the images of it. And there's one in particular where it's bones across the front chest. It's usually an animal skin, and sometimes the head of the animal or the horns of the animal. And in this instance, you could see the white, almost the white markings. And so it looked very similar to, again, they're called, and every dog soldier, if you look, you'll
You have
see they have
no
different
idea
images.
how crazy it is that that's wild because I've been consuming a lot of information over the weekend, and that is a huge phenomenon, the
It
dog
is.
man.
Yes.
But I did not know that they were in a similar, so you do feel that do you feel that there is a distinction between the dogmen and the skinwalkers, or you
Well,
believe that they're probably one and the
and
same?
again, what was curious to me is the image that I saw. It looked more like a dog soldier, but in the same breath, some of the characteristics, because as we know, a lot of skinwalkers appear to be, an animal energy walking on two legs.
Mhm,
They can go down on fours. Oftentimes they have horns.
mhm,
As you would see between either deer, or you would see even, I mean, they can replicate wolves and bears.
mhm.
But there's some similarities between the two.
Plus,
So
knowing how guarded that land is, it had to have been.
exactly. That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah.
So it would
Wow.
not, I can't say 100% it was a skinwalker, but I'm going to make that pretty strong determination it was something between that and a dog soldier. Yeah.
And now, do you have this photo?
I don't have it here with me. I will get it. We have to, we obviously can't share that photo if it's a
If
picture of
the
the child
Oh,
with
duh. Yeah, yeah,
with
yeah. No, no, yeah.
with a background. If there's a way to, again, we don't want to doctor the photo in any stretch of the imagination, but if we can extract the child from the
Yes,
photo, then we
got
could
it.
have a photo that we could actually view. Um,
That's
it was quite
so
remarkable
wild.
to see. And I actually had a dream
Wow.
about it too that night. And I wasn't intending to have a dream about it. It wasn't something I went to bed thinking, let's dream of skinwalkers and dog soldiers for the heck of it.
Please tell us about this dream, Miss Terri. I would love to hear this.
Well, it was very interesting because it was a very simple dream. In the dream, it's kind of like a dream in a dream. I just felt very, at peace. It was very still. It was more of a summer evening, and it was late night, and I could hear the crickets. And in this particular dream, I was just very calm and relaxed. And in the dream, I was actually in between wake and sleep, so a dream and a dream. And in that particular room that I stayed in, there's not the curtain's very sheer, so you can see outward from that window outside. And in this particular dream, I was just looking out, listening to the crickets in the dream, and then all of a sudden, I saw the entire image of what I had witnessed in the picture looking at me from the window.
Wow.
So I did wake up from that dream, and I in a bit of a start, as you can imagine, and thought, okay, well, don't want to see that tonight.
Wow.
And I may or may not have slept with the small table light on for the rest of the evening.
My gosh.
So you know which one that was.
Yeah.
May or may not have.
Well,
Yes.
and we've discussed, I mean, you have a very interesting bloodline. And,
Yes.
I'm going to sidebar because I think this is going to be a 2-part experience anyway. Because I was like, I can't help but ask all the questions that I'll probably ask, even though I was there for this story anyway. And so if we go into part 2, we do. But so, I don't know. This sounds so wild, but have you ever had any like family members that or a history of with like the 6-finger thing?
I have not, and I have heard of that anomaly. I do not that I am aware of.
Mhm.
Now, one thing too, remember, I actually come from a very, very large extended family. In fact, we were talking about that this weekend. Some of my aunts, they had 10 to 13 children
Mhm.
each. So I have tons of cousins out there
Mhm.
that I don't know. I really don't know 99% of them.
Mhm. I was listening to, there seems to be this like weird truth about America, whereas, in these old bloodlines, basically they call, they're of the giants, right? But
Yep.
they're so diluted
right.
and nobody really
Mhm.
knows. But I kind of was like, I was reading and learning about it. I was thinking, I wonder if Terry's family has any residuals of this, because the way it traces out is so hyper gifted, red
Mhm.
hair, sometimes the 6-finger 6-toe thing, but but more than anything, it's basically, I thought about how the story where you used to say, and it comes up in different how do you say, in different like concentrations within different people. And I always thought it was unique that of the kids, you scared your dad, like you
Mhm.
made him feel uncomfortable. There was something about you, and you're very gifted.
Yes.
And so it made me wonder, if he had any, if he was doing deals and whatever he was doing, there's no matter what an innateness to the bloodline. I just thought that was so curious.
Yes.
But anywho, speaking of the Skinwalkers, we were gonna go through that story sort of what we experienced when we were there last year.
Yes. Yes.
And I guess I'm gonna try to see if I can remember sort of where we started it, because for me, I was so much the viewer. So I'm gonna tell it like the viewer. And I say this, the viewer of you and your nephew, who is incredibly skilled, I would argue, in spiritual warfare. And I think you are too.
Is. He most definitely is.
And I'm not. So,
Well,
but I'll explain the story how I remember it, because
okay.
I was sitting on the couch and I was in between, I believe, your husband. Kiddo was on the ground, and maybe Sarah, maybe Cindy, maybe someone was next to me, either your sister or the niece. And I can't remember. But and I see your nephew, and he was already kept to himself, and he was a quiet guy. It's not like he was chatting, and then he left.
No.
But I watched him. He was cooking the beans. That was his job. So he was in the
Yes.
sink area.
Yes, he
And he
was.
just
We're making
stops.
baked beans. Yes.
Yep. And he starts looking out that small little window out front. And I'm very sensitive. I'm not gifted like you guys are, but I can tell when something changes. And you didn't have a tell. You're very good. Or maybe I just didn't notice you because all I could focus on was him.
Mhm.
Oh, and then you went into the kitchen. either you were in the living room with us or you were maybe, you were somewhere kind of away. I see you go in there. And then later, it was funny to me because the story changed and it was like, oh, you guys were on the beans together, but I don't know that that was true. You went and sought him out when the energy changed. And then you started working on it with him, I believe. But what was bizarre was nobody said anything.
Right.
Like, so, and I wanted to ask, I feel like that. I remember vividly feeling like that kid who would be like pulling the dress and be like, what's going on? But you guys were so intense. I was not going to do that. And I kept looking at your husband, like, do you notice it? And nobody noticed. I will never forget that weird feeling of nobody in the room seemed to notice that the whole energy had changed.
It did. It changed dramatically. It did.
So then, this is so strange. Yeah. Oh, but before now, if I remember correctly, before perhaps I had seen you and your nephew stand out on the patio, but that was before it felt really weird. It just was almost like, I remember he was staring off and then you kind of went and checked on him.
Right.
But then after that, maybe an hour, 30 minutes after that, we all come inside and then y'all start working on it. And he's not quite the same, but I don't know him that well. So he just seems standoffish. Then the stuff in the kitchen happens where there's something up.
Yeah.
So I get anxious and I can't really ask what's going on. You guys are in the kitchen, not really talking. And obviously something's up. Energetically, I feel it. And then I go off to the other window, the window in the back, and it's a full length, right? And I believe just to avoid the awkward of the other room who seems to not know anything, and I didn't want anyone asking me what was wrong because I didn't know. I start looking off. And then it starts raining. And you come up and I think either you were also looking out there or you were checking on me, but no matter what, it wasn't really, I still did not feel comfortable asking you what was, it felt very active.
It was very
just
active.
felt like what was going on was still going on. And it would be crazy to be like, hey, Terri, can you tell me what's going on? Because it's weird.
Well, and there's a reason why we don't talk. And we'll talk about that in a minute as well.
And then I remember you saying, that's so funny. I said, what? And you said that it started raining. And then I said, well, why is that funny? And you said, energy really likes the water. And then it was very obvious you were done talking. And fast forward, God, maybe I'm exaggerating, but I feel like it was like 15, 20 minutes. Still had to transpire. And then I felt a yell in my right ear that was not high pitch at all. It was almost manly, and it was almost like, huh. But it was just that. It was like, huh. It wasn't a long cry. And I remember I felt shooting pain down the right, like my ear, down to my shoulder. And then probably about 2 minutes after, you guys started talking, and honestly, it did feel over. But I think I said, did you? No, maybe I didn't. I was very timid. I didn't want to mess anything up. And so that was probably a 45-minute experience from start to finish. Okay, cool. Because that's my timeline. But time is different when these things start happening.
Yes.
I would love, from the moment that you guys were out on the patio at the first part, to kind of understand more about what was going on from your world.
Sure. And the thing that you've mentioned, and it makes perfect sense, when we are experiencing these things, there's not a lot of communication, and there's a very, very important reason behind that. When we are in the throes of something that we're trying to sort out, something that we're picking up, we want to make sure that we're not kind of talking about it out loud, making it clear to whomever's listening.
Yep.
Okay. And because we've done this, and what's so beautiful, I mean, as you well know, my nephew and I really had very limited interaction because of the dynamics of our family for many, many years. And so it's just in the last probably 15 years, not even that, probably 12 years, that we've actually gotten to know each other. And when you're in the center of these things, we know that communication could be very dangerous. And so we also recognized early on that we didn't have to say anything to know what each other was thinking.
Now, how fluid is that?
It's actually very fluid, surprisingly so.
What does that feel like to you?
It feels like conversation. I can hear it as conversation, but I know no words are coming out. Yeah. So it's more of the telepathy.
Yeah.
But feels as if the communication's going back and forth.
And it's not worded.
No.
That's the thing that people don't understand too about that process is its impressions.
Yep. It's
with
full,
intent.
Right. I mean, I'm getting all the information, all the data that I need, just by connecting, just by that energy, a moment. And what happened, when we go out, and it's similar because this is something that I noticed, and I'm going to reflect a little bit on the most recent along with this trip. I promise I'll stick to task.
No, you're perfect. Tell us everything.
But you know what? Obviously, the backdrop of the property has a lot of energy. The backdrop is a very wooded area. It's got a large pond on it. It's actually 2 ponds, and so it's very, very just large and very spacious. It also contains a very sacred place. We call the Hemlocks, which we know has been a Native American burial place. We know that because my dad used to dig up the Indian arrowheads from it and bring them home, and he liked to give them to kids, which just weird. But just I guess he thought that the spirits would be so angry they would go and torment the children, and he thought
he was
that
trying
would be
to desecrate
yes, exactly,
the kids.
So when we go out, we can hear and sense things already. A perfect example of that for me is current as just the other day when I went out to the same place, the same balcony that you're referring to look out and to gaze at the ponds and the tree line. I knew something was there, and I told it to go. I said, "Go now." And I didn't use words. I didn't shout it out. I just basically just, this energy is energy. You don't have to have a human running, communication like we would to each other. And all of a sudden, as I'm saying that, I closed my eyes and I could hear something very large running through the tree line, and it was very loud. And I could hear it. It would be about the equivalent if we were looking at it as how do we equate it to a sound that people would understand. It was probably like a large moose running through the woods, but we know it wasn't a moose running through the woods. It was that loud, and it was breaking things along the way.
And you heard this with your ear, with your
I heard it.
Yeah.
Actually, I heard it with my outer ear. So as I'm telling it to go, it realized that I saw it. It realized that I knew it was there. And so it took off because I could feel it there. I could feel it behind on the other side of the pond through the trees.
It's not used to being known.
Right. Exactly. And so I told it to go, and it ran further into the woods. It didn't, obviously it didn't just get up and disappear, away from me. It went further into the woods, but it did respond. So going back to the initial time when you were there with us and experiencing this with us, we both felt that there was something outside. There was something along the tree lines. There was something by the pond. It felt dark. It felt like there was communication going on. It felt like there was a lot of murmuring, and we felt like something was basically getting started. Something was going to occur, and we didn't know who it was going to be towards. We just knew that something was happening.
And what did that feel like when you guys started to realize something? Like, do you know who noticed it first? Was it him or you?
I'm not really sure. I don't know. Oftentimes,
for me, it felt like he went on alert first.
He probably did.
But it felt like he almost went cold, almost like ice cold and very driven.
Yes, and again,
then you stood, and then you got in that zone, and then it was almost like then suddenly Terri was cold and in the zone. It was so interesting.
And I could definitely see where he would have responded quickly because, again, he's got a family there, and this is his place.
He's there every day,
right? It's his residence. Wow. So the reaction was, we knew without communicating, we knew that something was there. We knew that something was taking place. We knew something was in the throes of some type of chase, chaos, whatever it may be. We also had a pretty good understanding that the physical world probably wouldn't know of it or hear of it. Okay. But we felt it, and we recognized pretty soon into this that more than likely, and again, my father is a horrible person, and he's been banned from that particular property. And so that has been something that has been initiated with the Native American energies that live there. It's like, we will protect you. We'll stay away from you pretty much. But neither side, meaning my family nor the energy that's already there, neither side wants, my dad there, because again, he desecrated their sacred grounds.
And before we go further, to add a little bit of context, in life, your dad had committed quite a few atrocities on the land,
Yes.
and had stored totems of taking of life.
Yes.
And on top of that, there had been sexual abuse. So there's a litany of inequities that had been planted in that land while he was living, which realistically, even though that land technically belonged to them at the time, with us being living, we do have dominion of this plane. So he was able to sort of do that.
Yes,
maybe under
he
protection
was.
of dark forces, maybe not, but there's definitely something to be said about that. Now he is past. And so those rules are much more abiding.
They are. It's very very interesting how, and the way you put it, because that makes perfect sense. When we are in the physical plane, yes, we have dominion, but what we do is also not forgotten.
No.
And as we reach the spiritual realm of things and we become an energy source instead of a human body walking around in the physical earthbound energy, we have an atonement as well. We have things that we have to be
answer
reminded
for, possibly.
Exactly.
Be reminded. You're so funny. That's a Terryism. Be reminded of.
So we knew something was happening, and we suspected, just based on the fact that there felt like there was going to be some type of altercation. We felt that my father was back, that he was on the property, and that's a big no for both sides. And stepping back to the day before, we had been to the house that I grew up in.
That's right.
We had been in that whole area. And so we weren't taunting anything. We weren't going there with any malicious intent at all. We were simply going to see what it was looking like, as time kind of desecrates it on its own, as Mother Nature takes it down.
Well, and I was there in the car when y'all were discussing as we were going to it. I was very curious, obviously, but I don't have the same experience as you guys have. And when we got to the house, he who's he's a healthy guy, he's
Mhm.
and he was so kind of awkwardly far away and white.
Yep.
And your husband doesn't really feel a lot at the time. I didn't feel anything except a curiosity to approach this one area, which obviously I wasn't. I knew, I was like, this curiosity is not mine, because the last thing I want to do is see what's in that room.
Right.
But you had a very visceral response to it. You kept saying you felt very animalistic towards it.
Yes, very much so. Absolutely.
And y'all were kind of trying to figure out what was going on, because there was your nephew y'all were approaching it not to taunt it, but to sort of deduce what was active. You guys kept saying it's active again, and we got to figure out what's active.
What's active about it? What is going on here? What's active? Is it the actual human ghost? Is it more demonic energy? What is active?
Is it the old or the new? You kept saying.
Right, exactly. And what it felt like, one part of it at least, was at one point I felt like it was reaching out to you.
Yeah.
Because I could feel this hand come out, and it felt very much like you could envision, the kind of a twisted tree, and have a face in it, and have arms that were more human-like, and it was reaching out of the window. So
the one I'm sure I was curious about.
And so exactly. So it was like, nope, you need to back off from that. You back away from that area. Again, there's so many things that happen in that environment, in that house, that it's hard to take it and pull it apart, because there was just so many experiences. And even in that short little visit that we were there, we knew that the energy was just taking on, again, another, almost like almost like it was posturing.
Well, it's a Frankensteinian energy.
Yes, it is.
And
exactly.
we talked about that, and I don't mind going into this because we're definitely doing a part 2. But I remember asking you, God, this is so interesting, because I remember the snake. Oh, I remember the snake, and I remember that you y'all were, and I mean, my God, he just seemed ill looking. I felt
Yes.
like, I felt like your husband and I were kind of frolicking, like we just weren't having a negative experience. And here you're feeling like you want to just rip this whole house out of its existence. He's
Mm-hmm.
looking like he's about to throw up, and like
Mm-hmm.
I felt a little bit worried for him. But he also kind of got engaged at the end a little bit more aggressively, which I thought was interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
I asked you, I said, are because obviously there was life taken within that home,
Yes,
and also
absolutely.
there were horrible things
Absolutely.
consumed in that home, so desecration
Absolutely.
after life. So there's a lot that went down.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I asked, I said, are these energies, because y'all had said it had gone dormant for
Mm-hmm.
a while, so it was
Mm-hmm.
weird that it was active again.
Right.
So I
Well, it had
asked,
gone dormant. Yes.
are these I was like, I don't know how this world works as much, are these the ones that were the lives that were taken? And y'all said that it was, I thought this was fascinating. Essentially, the place marked a place of power. So
Mm-hmm.
anybody who wanted to kind of be in a seat of power without having to earn it would have sought that out. So you said, no, there's a
Yes.
new sheriff in town. You said there's interesting energy because there's a very new energy, and
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of corralling some old,
Yes, absolutely. And
which
that's
is
what
bizarre.
happens. Uh, and it was really a new feeling. There was some how do I put it? Some energy that felt like it had been there a long while. But what it was being resurrected was a little of them, but a lot of something new.
Mm-hmm.
And we do see that from time to time, where you go into a place that's had a real, bad, just horrible past, crimes against humanity past, and you see and you feel that there's just something that's taken residence there,
Mm-hmm.
because it's an energy. I mean, it's kind of like if you're a creature and you live in a swamp, you're looking for swamp like things. Do
Mm-hmm.
you see? And so when you find a place that's got a match to what you are as far as a dark energy, then and no one's claiming it, then you're like, oh, that's mine then.
It's
And
naturally fortified.
exactly, it's naturally fortified. And so there was a feeling that there was some old, again, some remnants of the past, but it
Mm-hmm.
felt like there was some new energies. Now, one thing I do want to always, say, because I feel very much, and I feel very protective of any of the victims, is that most often the victims are not part of that trail. They're not going to be the demonic energy. They're not
Mm-hmm.
going to be, the bad things. They'll be the ones that reach out and ask for help if they're
Mm-hmm.
stuck. And
Mm-hmm.
they look a little scary because they haven't crossed yet, some of them. So they come across as being something like you think the boogeyman's there, but in fact, it's just someone who's just not crossed. But most often the victims, I did my best as I could to cross as many as I could. And so anything that would have stayed would have likely been either trapped for a long period and decided to stay, and didn't have any reason to leave, or it would have been, again, something else would have come into the place because it was attracted to the energy.
Can we go back to when you said they kind of look like what would your example of a soul that has kind of gotten stuck or gotten trapped? Is it like a physical decay, or do they start taking on animalistic features? What would the
For me, what I typically see, and again, for the listeners, I know this doesn't sound, happy or anything, but they tend to have a level of decay,
Okay, that would make sense.
because there's still too much in humanness. There's too much in the human form, the human essence, and
Yeah.
because of that, they tend to take on what they would look like if they were still right where they were dropped off. If they
Yeah.
were, in the floorboards or in the cellar, they're going to continue
Oh,
to have that look.
see, I'm so innocent in the thought form. I'm thinking like he looks like a normal person. No, these people were murdered. Like, of course they're not going to look well. I completely
Right.
forgot that component. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, just
Yeah.
Tom, Dick, and Harry decaying after they pass because they haven't tried. That's not. Yeah, no, they look like. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Completely forgot that was how they had
Yeah.
crossed over. Okay,
Right.
please, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
And again, what we do find, which is very, very sad, is that most often people that have traumatic deaths tend to have a more difficult time crossing over,
Hmm.
because it's just like anything. If you're in the throes of a nightmare and your beloved grandmother walks to you and starts waving you in her direction, and you think she's dead, what's worse, the nightmare or going, like, no, she's gone, I'm not going there.
Yeah, it probably feels like a trick.
It feels like a trick.
Oh gosh.
And so when energy gets stuck, they continue to have the same kind of form. I guess this is the simplistic way of saying it. The form is what they left as, however they left.
And let's jump forward, and we'll get to kind of the experience probably at the end or in the next chapter. But let's bring up the because we tie it all together, I promise. Tell us about the blonde girl.
The lady of the woods. And it was so interesting because there were many hunters. Because again, we're talking 5,000 acres of property, and there's spread out quite far, as you can imagine. And it's a lot of wilderness where I'm from. So it's not, here we hear 5,000 and we think, oh my God, that sounds like all of downtown, Dallas. But again, when you're in the wilderness and you're in the country, 5,000 acres is a lot of property, a lot of wood line, a lot of trees, a lot of, brush, a lot of creeks, a lot of everything. Mm-hmm. And there were hunters that would bring that up. In fact, there was a local historian that actually had written a book. He worked for the newspaper once upon a time in that community. He's since passed, but he had written a book and had mentioned the Lady of the Woods. And what we had seen, some people called her the Deer Lady. And the reason why they called her the Deer Lady or the Deer Woman was because she was often seen while the guys are hunting for deer.
Okay.
And so they made an assumption that the blonde woman in the nightgown was likely, helping them to find, deer.
Oh.
But we knew that the woman in the nightgown was one of my dad's victims. And it had been hinted on by my mother. At one point later on, when things after the woman had been basically murdered, that they had kept someone there. They kept someone up in the cabin in the woods for a long period of time.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even know that part of it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that she'd been there for a while.
Yeah.
Which is why she's in a nightgown. That
Yes.
makes sense. Okay.
Yes.
And you used to, I remember very, very specifically, you used to try to honor her.
I did. And so when I would go, I would feel her there. And I would see her out of the corner of my eye, but she didn't come close to me. And the reason why I believed, even though she, I made it very clear that I was not, the bloodline, it doesn't mean that I'm the monster. And she wouldn't come towards my nephew, but she would be seen in the same area. So she had recognized that he was not harmful either. That he was not someone that she needed to fear. And again, she would have seen him probably, but he would have not seen her to know to help her. Mm-hmm. So she knew he didn't do anything wrong to her.
Right.
Where me, I'm a stranger from nowhere, other than I'm part of the family. And so for a while there, I'm sure she was a little bit more skittish. But we went one time and I did a brief ceremony to honor her. I brought it was actually one of my favorite necklaces that I brought, and it had a beautiful tiger eye, and it was all nicely wrapped with copper. It was just gorgeous. And I wore it there. And I told her that if she could find a way to take it from the stone that I placed it on, if she could take it, that she could begin to be free. And this was about 3 years ago that I did that. And I wanted her to have it because it was her way to know that she was loved. And it was my way to help her to know it was okay to cross.
What do you mean if you are able to take this did you mean physically able?
Well, physically and emotionally and spiritually. Again, when you're, we look at those that have passed as they're just kind of like a shadow, but they're not. They're more than a shadow. But what I wanted her to try to do was to at least accept it as something she could have.
And you did not feel that she felt that? Okay. Because probably just a lack of knowledge.
Right. And a lack of trust.
Of course. That's heartbreaking. I didn't know the part that she had been kept in the cabin. I knew that she'd probably been, her life had ended there, but I did not know that there was a longer story. Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
And so she stayed in that area for a very long time. I did ask my nephew when I was there this past weekend, I asked him if he had seen her. And he said, which made me feel really good, that he had not seen her for some time and that there were no more reports of her. So I can't prove it, but I'm going to go with the notion that that's been handled. That and quite honestly, I'd have to scour the woods to know exactly where I would have placed it, because I placed it where I was told to. And so it wasn't like a strategic place that I said, here, X marks the spot.
Oh, you got guided to that. Oh my God.
I got guided to a place, and I put the necklace down on the rock. And I said a prayer for her, and I spoke to her, and I spoke to her out loud, and I spoke to her in my mind as well, to let her know that it was a gift to her. And if she could see that she could trust and know that she was thought of and she was cared about, if she could take it, then it would help her to go.
And this ties into what we experienced. I wonder too. I mean, like, God, I wonder if that might have scared her straight too, to understand. I mean, there was so much that happened that day, and it involved her. So I wonder too, if she had battled with that idea, I wonder if she's like, well, that wasn't particularly fun, and this kind lady was a part of the solution, and she's also the one who gave me that necklace. I wonder, like, there could certainly be an argument to suggest that maybe she'd be like, well, maybe this doesn't seem fun, and like, maybe I should try it. Like, I don't know.
Right.
Lord have mercy.
And again, we do see it time and time again, that trauma can and does at times hang out in the area which created the trauma. It becomes stuck to the property or the area, the whatever it may be. We see that in battlegrounds. That's why they could be the most haunted. There are those that when they are struck with trauma, will stay, their essence stays on the property.
This might be crazy, and I don't mean this disrespectfully at all, but is there a chance that the rock where you set that necklace, could that have been where her life was potentially taken? Or
very much could be.
Okay, because I wondered, there was something about cleansing that, or like making it okay.
It very well could be. Damn. And for all the listeners that are out there, because I hear it. I mean, I've seen it on Reddit. I mean, I've had many reviews from the book and Netflix. For all of you people that think that, oh gosh, why didn't you alert someone? Why didn't you tell someone? Why didn't you? I'm going to tell you, when I first started going back upstate, I was the town crier, basically, to get things handled. And my nephew was too. And we went to some of the local officials, and they said, don't open that Pandora's box.
Yeah. No, they would not cooperate.
They did not cooperate with the reporters. They did not cooperate with us, obviously. They were very, very leery of anyone asking questions about my family on our behalf. I mean, I said, hey, I raised the flag and said, listen, there are people out there that need help.
But now we see all this Epstein stuff and the Diddy stuff, and we know who your father was. He's very wildly intelligent. Who's to say he hasn't compromised all of these people?
Well,
there's so much fear.
It is. And a lot of them were compromised because a lot of the people they interacted with. Yes.
I always forget that component. Dang it. Yeah. Your mom had been participating in the activities of the night for money.
Yes.
And they'd paid up. Dang.
Yes. That's right. You can't spill other people's secrets when you've got your own.
No. And especially in that small town.
Small town.
And can we go then into a little bit of the backstory about what the camp was? Because you said y'all couldn't go. That's very, very private to your dad.
Well, it's interesting because the camp had taken on a second life after I left. I knew of the camp when I was growing up, that there was a camp. But again, when I left at 18, I left. Mm-hmm. And just because I left things didn't get to, back to a normal or get to be normal. There was another camp that was actually resurrected in that same area, newer, not really any bigger. It was one room. It had a wood stove. It had a window and it had a door. There was a small table in there. And they had put which looked like a real just small little makeshift twin bed, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there would have been nothing in it for me to want to go into it, because again, I'd been trapped enough to know not to be trapped in a camp.
Yeah,
You know what
gosh.
I mean?
On the old property, absolutely not.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing
10-foot
that.
pole.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need that. I was claustrophobic for a long time.
You didn't even
'cause-
like me getting close to the water
No.
when I was there. You know what I mean? Like, you were very on alert even before anything happened.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the bottom line is just opening up that door. I mean, because the cabin is still there.
Mhm.
The cabin is, again, Mother Nature has a way about herself to take it down eventually, which it's doing. It's piece by piece. But the door, actually, I didn't take let me rephrase that. The door was pulled off by a bear, which I love.
Which is awesome.
Isn't that
That's
awesome?
cool.
A
Yeah.
bear ripped the door off. Well, I'll tell you, isn't that great? It's like
Good.
being out in the wilderness. And so I just thought that was so cool. And so just even walking over the threshold to get in there, I couldn't do
No,
it. It
no
was
need.
so overwhelming for me that I got out and all I wanted to do, my head was spinning. I just wanted to throw up. It just was overwhelming. It was more than I could deal with. Or let me rephrase it. It was more than I needed to deal with. Let me put it
Yeah,
that way.
exactly.
And, if I had to have been in there to endure it for a reason, I would have done so. But there was no reason to do that. And
Mhm.
so I just felt all the, just all the pain. Every time I think of that camp in the woods, I think of the my father had a big old goat with horns, big old gnarly
Seems
goat with
appropriate.
horns. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I mean, really. And to this day, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I don't eat goat meat. I can't look at a goat without thinking of the devil. I'm sorry. That's just me. But
Oh, you have, yeah.
but he used to wrap barbed wire around the horns.
Mm.
And the reason he did it, because the goat was really, really a nasty thing. He did that because what he wanted was, if anyone was trespassing, he wanted the goat to attack them and basically rip them apart.
Be that much more deadly.
It would be that much more deadly.
I'm sure he abused it, so it's probably angry and all the
That some
time.
of that barbed wire was embedded into the, it's a tragedy, but most definitely.
And then to kind of close this down, because we'll get to the good stuff next time, but we'll go into sort of the part that, because I'm trying to elucidate all of the parts that go into playing what we experience, because it is a little bit profound almost. And I hate to, I'm not trying to be like, oh, we've got to be in this, but there were so many moving parts and they were all so important.
Yes. That's right. And that's exactly it. There are so many moving parts. It's funny for me to listen to some people, when they've asked me questions about the past and so on and so forth. And when they just seem like it just doesn't, it's not possible. It's not possible for anything to be so horrendous. It's not possible for there to be such evil. It's not possible. And instead of thinking, what idiots they are, I think, oh my gosh, to have that view, to really feel that view, to have the innocence on that level where that seems like that would never even begin to be something anyone would even fathom or think of or do, or of course not do. It's really
I think that
interesting.
there's a lot of people, and I think the internet is making this possible. And I'm actually, like, my heart is actually very, very wide open for the fact that this is true, because I've seen it recently where, there are these people who are just on forsaken land, or something is just so out of their gnosis or their control. They would have no idea why this would be happening to them. And then they're just kind of on the receiving end of these really horrible, metaphysical, terrifying experiences. And they have no one they can talk to, and no one's going to believe them.
Right.
But they could never know that their grandfather desecrated that land 25 generations ago. And now they're basically being sought after because they were promised to something that wasn't even, not even an active promise they made.
Exactly.
So I find it, we are in a very fortunate time where there
Yes.
does seem to be more truth coming out. Because you can say, like what we're doing. People don't have to believe us. It sounds crazy. But the right person who's had experiences that are similar to this, they're going to know what the truth that we speak. And they're going to
That's
know
exactly right.
this is not as unique as we would hope.
No, and you exactly said it correctly too. That we would hope. We don't want people to experience this stuff.
No.
We don't want people to have these issues, to have these difficulties. There's no fun in being terrorized. There's no joy in any of that. And it is more common than any of us would like to believe. But
I hate
when
to
it
say
happens,
this,
it happens.
North America seems to be an interesting place for these things.
Mhm.
So one thing I want to get into sort of is we're going to sort of discuss briefly, and this is something that your nephew shared with me in kind of the storyline.
Mhm.
So I'm going to kind of tell it to you and see if you have a different version, so to speak.
Okay. Mhm.
And I wish he was here, but
I know.
so essentially what he shared with me, because I was quizzing him every time that you were hanging out with your sister, I'm hanging out with him. And I'm like, hey, it's not to be
Yeah.
annoying, but I'm going to be like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What's the story? And he was so forthcoming. And so I'm forever grateful. I had some of the most interesting conversations with him. And he was just so giving. Like he never made me feel like that I was being annoying. And I appreciated that because I was trying not to be, but
No, you weren't
anyway.
annoying. He loved visiting with you. And you'll probably have a chance to visit with him in August. They're trying to come here.
Perfect.
So we'll
That's
see
so
if that plays
excellent.
out. Yeah.
Oh,
But anyway,
I would
I
love
didn't mean
that.
to interrupt
No.
you. Go ahead.
But basically what he shared with me, that the land itself, so that there's the hemlock vine or bush and then the hemlock trees.
Yes.
And the bushes are the ones that are poisonous, that like are in Shakespearean, right? They're the ones that you like poison with hemlock. But the trees, which I didn't know before this, the hemlock trees are beautiful and it's just
very
another
beautiful
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently in this, in a time past, there had been, and he felt, and again, he's very intuitive.
Yes, he is.
The two of you seem the strongest. We'll see how, but in, the story that was shared with him, because they share land and they were kind of establishing rules. There was a knowingness of what's up, essentially. And there was a group of Native Americans who had their spring poisoned because their land was sought after. And instead of leaving, because there was a recognition, this was what broke my heart, was he was saying, there was a recognition that this was true. Maybe you shared this part where they knew they would have been poisoned. And they stayed behind. And they just continued to basically nurse the ones that were dying until they all died. Yes. So it was a weird collective oath that they made to just die together there, specifically. And I wonder, I can't help but wonder what that does to the land. And so he shared that there is very evidently, and I said, how do you commune with them? And he said, through the hemlock trees. Yes. And I said, well, like, do you have to touch them or can you just speak? And he said, well, it's you can do both. But he said he likes to go and touch them if he can. And that's sort of like he kind of will, and thank you. And he asks permission if he can go there, even though it's his land.
You do ask for permission. Absolutely. You don't cross them unless you do.
And I thought, and he said sometimes the answer is no. And sometimes it's yes. And sometimes they don't say anything. So then he doesn't.
Right.
And then that is sort of where we also understand well, actually, this is a question. I've never asked this before. Do you believe that the Skinwalkers that you guys have seen for years, because you were telling me about them before I ever met that family, ever was physically there. Do you believe that they were participants of the time that which they made that oath to just die together? Or do you feel that these are much more old?
I believe that they're both.
Okay.
I feel like they're both. And again, when people hear the word Skinwalkers, and we'll talk about it as well the next session, I mean, we are told to be terrified of them. They are, oh my gosh, they are demons. They are the worst evil ever, and so on and so forth. Perhaps many are. Perhaps they are. But when we had a pact with them, and we knew we had a pact with them, doesn't mean that we're going to go and invite them to dinner, right? Doesn't mean that we're going to go and wave as we walk by. We have a pact with them to not harm them, to not do anything to harm them. We're not trying to, basically banish them. We share the same property. And so if we take care of the property, then they don't have any reason to punish us.
Yes, and that was sort of the interesting and your son has even said that to me privately, talking about this gray nature of them that's not really spoken about.
Yes.
Obviously there are ones that are created in mania and in demonic origin.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's an argument to suggest that the creation of them themselves is utilizing witchcraft, demonic magic, whatever you want to call it. But no matter what, when they become entities, they have their agenda. And if it is more about protection and more about the land, that is how they will manifest. So they're just like people in that way. One might be created with the intention of being murderous and quite, but see, that doesn't seem, more often than not, anytime someone sees a skinwalker, they live to talk about it.
Yes.
Unless they progress forward and do not heed the warning.
Exactly.
So,
and that's exactly what it feels like. When we run upon them, we come upon them, we have a pact. And I will always say that, when I hear about them, and the first thing that you'll hear me say is, we have a pact. The pact prevents anything bad to happen to us. We're the ones that would happen to because we're in the physical bodies. But the pact demands respect.
And next episode, we're going to talk about.
Yes, indeed.
Not only is there a pact, but it seems to me that there is a willingness to work together. And
yes,
I think
there is
that
a collaboration.
Is beautiful. What a weird reality we live in. And I'm so grateful though that there are people like you, there are people like your nephew, people like your son, people that are willing to acknowledge that there is this very real kind of, there are forces that work with it. There are energies everywhere. There's forces that are always at work. And to deny that, religion's not really at play here. It's not about saying, yes, you're Christian. Yes, you're, Jew. It's not about that. There's a reality to this world.
There is a very strong reality to this world. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of it hinges on honor.
And I can't, why you got to drop that right when we got to go? What does that mean? I know what you mean though, but okay, we're going to start on honor.
We'll start with honor.
And you and I will do our best, as we always do, to walk within honor, because that's the best we can do.
That's the best we can do. And
oh my gosh, I love you so much.
Do that, then we've done our job.
I love metaphysics, but I also must admit, this, my heart gets to fluttering in a weird way. It's excitement, it's fear, and it's also kind of this awestruck reality of the world, and so I could not ask for a better person to have these experiences with and share these conversations with, because I'm fascinated. I mean, it's wild. It
is a wild world out there, but we walk in the light. Beautiful and amazing world.
Oh yeah. And the thing is too, as we sort of, we walk in the light, we've chosen that, and thank God, everyone can choose.
That's right. Everyone can choose.
Even as we bring to light some of these stories or even some of these experiences or realities, we can bring those experiences into the light. And more often than not, that has more benefit than you think.
Oh, it sure does. I agree. Absolutely.
So, we'll catch you next time. And we'll talk about honor and what happened on that property. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. We haven't even gotten to the good stuff, and I feel like I'm like enchanted with what we've already talked about.
I know. I'm so excited to continue this conversation. But you know what? I agree. I think you and I have officially done it.
We've done it. All right. I love you. I'll see you next week.
You too.
And we'll get into it.
Yes, and I promise I'll be more wide awake then, okay?
You're perfect. Thank you. See you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.